House on Haunted Hill, starring Vincent Price, the thriller man himself, as I like to call him. It's weird with Vincent Price. I always knew him for Michael Jackson's Thriller, and I was always like, he's like a really like creepy, demanding voice. I'm like, I would love to like hear or see that. And then little did I know he was making movies the whole time. And I was like, oh well, cool. So House on Haunted Hill, I um actually didn't see this movie until fairly recently. Um, it was always my dad said, "Well, you need to watch it. Like, you need to watch this thing." And um, it. It's weird because I kept seeing this movie mixed up with The Haunting, with the original Haunting, and it's like, are they one and the same? Or are they the same thing? It's just like one's named this and maybe this is named that in other places. I'm like, what's going on here? Because I kept seeing clips of this one of House on Haunted Hill seeing like pop up every now and then. And I'm like, okay, what is this? Is this Haunting Hill, on Haunted Hill, or is this like what is this? Like what are we doing here? So I didn't watch this movie until fairly recently, until my dad said, no, you got to watch this one. And for, the 13 reviews of Fright this year, especially doing classic movies, I had to do this one. And I actually wanted to watch this one. And for doing it for the special, it seemed the perfect time. So House on Haunted Hill, if you don't know, it is about Vincent Price plays pretty much I believe a millionaire playboy, and invites a group of people that he knows to this house. That one of the patrons is I think one of the owners, or like knows stuff about it, and they all go to the house, and he proposes a party, and it is, if you stay in this house until morning, you will each get, I believe it was you get some money. I'm trying to remember. I think it was like $1,000, which at the time in the 50s, that was a lot of money. And if you're offered $1,000 to stay in a haunted house today, you'd be like, no, dude, I'm not doing that. You need to bump that up you got to add some more zeros to that for me to do it. So, and as they're doing it, they don't know, like, whatever's happening is part of the experience, or there's an actual haunting going on. One thing that I actually really liked about this one, because I did like this one, was I liked how everybody's kind of no background. Like, everybody, they knew him, they know Vincent Price, but there's like a little bit of information you're given, but it felt very like Clue. And I think like people that made that movie looked at something like this and said, okay, everybody's kind of no background in the start. Like, everybody's got a reason to be here, and then stuff starts unfolding from there, and then they all start learning more about one another, and that they're all connected to one thing. This was kind of that same thing, and I'm like, oh, but this predates that. I like that. Something other than Clue, something like Abigail, where it did the same thing, where it's like all these people, they're on a job together, but they don't know each other. And then throughout it, they all start learning more about each other, and there's a bigger purpose to why they're there. So I liked that. I always like that kind of stuff, especially with characters. If you're putting a bunch of characters in a house, it's best to, one of the best ways you could do it is to do what this does, which is everybody's kind of no background. Everybody doesn't know each other, but they know, like, person involved. They all know the same person involved. And then it just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And then they all start realizing that they actually do have connections with one another. So I really like that. Now, was I scared at all? Not really. But there was one thing that I was like, okay, that's cool. I like that. Um, and there's definitely spots in here where I'm like, yeah, I think the black and white did help. And also, if you were like kind of watching this in the dark, maybe that would help. I did both, but it was still kind of like, okay, but that was probably just my tolerance. So I'm not nitpicking on that. Vincent Price is he was always great. I love that guy. Everybody else does a pretty good job. One flaw I did have was the character. I can't remember her name, but she was the one of the guests that showed up, and she's kind of the one experiencing everything. And she was very much like that hysteria kind of thing, where it's like, running around, kind of thing. Like there was really no other aspect to her character, and that was probably a product of the time, but it was kind of like, all right, so you're the one going through all this, but you're not really doing anything else. So, and then when it gets to the end, they do something at the end that I took one look at and I went, oh, what the hell is this? But then they turn it around and I was like, oh, okay, all right. I like that. All right, cool. I'm not going to say what it is, but let's just say it involves a skeleton. But then it becomes bigger. And I was like, okay, because yeah, I was going like, oh, when a skeleton shows up, I won't say when, why, or anything like that if you haven't seen this. So when it happens, I was like, oh God, that's not good. But then they turn it around. I was like, okay, that's actually kind of cool. And then they do something else, like they hand out guns during during it. And I was like, okay, this is an interesting party. But then they do something with that I thought, like, that's really clever. I like that. That's cool. So but then the end just kind of drops. Like, it's just like, oh, this happens, this happens, this happens, the end. And it's like, okay, but what about afterward? There's no like epilogue to any of this. So it kind of abruptly ends, which is a problem I had. And because there was like stuff going on, I'm like, I want to know about this. Like, what about this? Can you explain this? Can you explain that? And you're really not given any explanation. So I don't know if that had to do with, the fact they only had a limited amount of time, because the movie's like almost 80 minutes long. So it's really short. It's definitely not short to sit through. So there was some stuff that was missing that I was like, I kind of like to know more about that. So I feel like if they had maybe like an extra 10 minutes or something like that, they could definitely fit a lot of those in there, a lot of those stuff that was missing. And I think that would have been a little better. But, overall, this was still very good. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. There was a couple things here and there where I was like, okay, that's the time period. I'm not going to penalize that. But I also liked how the movie kind of threw something at me that I was very like, oh, I don't like that at all. And then it just turns itself around on me and just makes it part of the story. And I was like, oh, okay, that's actually pretty cool. I like that. So, this gets maybe a high grade, because it would be amazing if some of those like little things in there were explained, like some of the explanation stuff was explained. But this is still very good. And, if you like your ghost stuff, you probably have already seen this. And if you haven't, then you definitely should, because this was kind of, this era where something like The Haunting, even the original like 13 Ghosts, it was definitely a time when they were getting more experimental with horror, and they were getting like more paranormal stuff and like with ghosts and stuff. I mean, I look back at like the original 13 Ghosts and I'm like, yeah, that was definitely time period where I'm like, I understand you want to do like these things, but you really didn't have the technology or the time to actually do this. That's why I personally think the 13 Ghosts remake in the 2000s, I actually like that one. But I reviewed that one, so you can go take a listen to that if you want. But with Haunting of Hill House, we wouldn't have gotten, decades of horror of paranormal stuff if it really wasn't for like this movie and a couple of other ones, but these ones. So yeah, if you haven't seen House on Haunted Hill, definitely go watch it. It's a classic.